and welcome once again to Scorpion Cigar Reviews. Today I will be reviewing a cigar I picked up when I was in Key West. This cigar is made by a company called Island Cigars out of the Dominican Republic by a man named Rafael Fuente. This particular cigar is a dual wrapped Figurado, both Connecticut and Habano wrapper. I've had other shapes and sizes of this particular cigar with the dual wrapper, and I found it to be really quite tasty, very well blended. You can see it's comes to a nice little point. It's thicker near the bottom of it, and as you work your way up towards the top, it has a triple cap, it appears. Maybe a double cap. I will say that I do have a slight defect in the wrapper, and I believe that happened while I was on vacation, and unfortunately this is my last cigar from them. This cigar runs $15. All of their proprietary brand cigars, and I believe she told me it was aged 5 years. They all run $15 a piece. If you purchase, I think it was 5 or more, then they were $10 a piece. So I bought 5 of these, and so then it'd be $10 a piece. Plus the neat little thing was, if I bought a certain number of cigars, I also was able to choose a little box of my own for free. These you could purchase these individually for, I think they were $12 if I remember correctly. They had different types of pictures on them. They weren't all the same. They weren't all the same size. This one holds 5 cigars. They had some that were for 3 cigars. I like the design on this one particularly. I was actually hoping for something a little more islandy, but I didn't find quite exactly what I was looking for. But this, I found it interesting, and it's pretty neat. It's a cedar box, and they painted a little picture on the outside, and on the back is their little web address. This islandcigars.com. What is it? islandcigarfactory.com. They're in Key West. They actually had several shops. They had an actual brick and mortar store, and then they had several of these little, I call them shacks almost. They're like in an alley between buildings. They put a little roof over it. At the time I didn't realize it was all the same manufacturer, but I later found out that it was. But I enjoyed this cigar shop in the brick and mortar building. They had various types of cigars in addition to their proprietary brand. They had a few other brands that you can get pretty much anywhere. But I was specifically looking for a cigar that I could only get in that area, and I found it, and I've been quite happy with it. So, back to this cigar. It has just general tobacco smells to it. And as I had mentioned, I did manage to damage the wrapper. I'm not sure exactly how or when, but I'm sure this was my doing. Probably either when I put it in this little box, or taking it out, or moving it from one humidor to another, or something along those lines. I've nicked the wrapper, but it's way down towards the nub, and it's not all the way through. It's just on one of the layers, so I think I'll be okay. Today I'll be using my punch. They claim this to be a 7 by 54 ring. I'm assuming it's 54 at its widest point. And it might be 7 inches long. I'm just wondering if my punch might be bigger than I want. Maybe I should have just used a regular guillotine cutter. Well, let's see what happens here. Okay. Seems to have been successful. I'll be using my torch flame Burns-O-Matic torch lighter to light the cigar today. Before I do that, the pre-draw has definitely has some cedar in there. Not overpowering, just very pleasant on the cedar. Not going to get much of a smell from the foot because of the shape of the cigar with the Figurado. It's almost like it has a cap on both ends almost. Down at the foot there is a slight amount of exposed tobacco. Just getting general tobacco smells from that as well. Maybe a small amount of cedar. But let's light it up and take it from there. Today is the first time this season that I've smoked in my cigar lounge. Bit of a rotten day out today. It's foggy and damp and rainy and a bit chilly and just not at all pleasant to be out in. So I'm going to move myself back into my cigar lounge, and I've also been rearranging the last couple days, just trying to come up with a little something different, see what works out for me. The acoustics of this room aren't really conducive to filming, but I may be able to rectify that with some soft furnishings to help absorb the sound. The shape of the room is just, it echoes. So, a rather tight draw, tighter than I like. Initially, this should be, I would think, a medium body overall, being that the Corojo wrapper is a mild wrapper and the Habano is a full-bodied. When you look at the two different cigars, one that's all Corojo, one that's all Habano, they claim the Corojo to be mild and the Habano to be full-bodied, so I'm going to go with this being somewhere in the middle. So with that, it's kind of strong initially. A little bit bitter. There's a little bit bitter aftertaste. But I know from experience from smoking these particular cigars that it does end up melding all together and blending out nicely and being a very nice cigar. So with that, I'll get into the first third. And okay, so here we are, well into the first third of this dual wrapper Figurado from Island Cigars, Island Cigar Factory. The burn is uneven. It's not wavy, it just seems to have burned unevenly. And I almost wonder if it has something to do with the two different types of wrapper. Perhaps the Corojo wrapper burns quicker than the Habano wrapper. And that would account for the unevenness. But we'll see. Ash seems to be holding up. No significant cracking. I do see perhaps, I have a feeling where it's going to crack. I'll give it another moment, then I'll go ahead and ash it so I don't ash all over my lap and the chair and the floor and whatnot. The draw has loosened up just a little bit, which is good. It was a bit too tight for my liking early on. I'm starting to pick up a little bit of leather in the smoke. A little bit of spice, maybe not white pepper. What is that? It's quite pleasant. Maybe it is a little bit of white pepper. But it's smooth. It's not at all, there's no bite to it. It's pleasant. At this point I'm going to go ahead and I'll ash this so I don't end up with a mess. Yeah. Broke off right about where I figured it would. I'm glad I ashed it. Didn't take much, just a slight flick and it was ready to ash. So I don't know a whole lot about the manufacturer of this cigar. I don't know if he's at all related to the Fuente family from, Fuente Cigars, Arturo Fuente, and whatnot. This Rafael Fuente, might do a little more research on him. He's made a pretty nice cigar here, really. I've been real happy with it. The burn seems to actually be correcting itself, perhaps, but that may be, once again, just due to the differences in wrappers, and as one wrapper is catching up to the other wrapper, one wrapper is burning a little quicker and evening out. We'll see what happens. Kind of curious to see what happens from here. There's a reasonable amount of smoke that comes off this cigar, not so much that it's going to totally engulf the room, but there's definitely a smoke coming off of this. What I would consider to be a proper amount. I don't particularly like when a cigar is so smoky that the room just fills within the first 5 minutes to the point where you can't breathe, you can't see, your eyes are burning. And even with, I have my room air purifier running, trying to help to remove the smoke. But I also find that while that may remove the odor, the smoke itself tends to still be in the air. So I've also got a window cracked open and the skylight cracked open. It was doing a pretty fair job of drawing it straight up. So we'll see what happens. And then after the room is cleared of smoke and I'm all done, I'll close the window and the skylight and just let the air purifier do its job of removing any of the other odors from the smoke. I don't like the smell of stale smoke. I do, however, like, and I've only had this happen with a few cigars, you don't really notice it when you're in the room, but you leave the room, come back a couple minutes later, and there's a scent of a fresh cigar. Some cigars put off a nasty odor. You walk back in the room and it stinks, and you know why everybody complains about the smell of cigars. And then sometimes you walk back into the room and it can smell so pleasant. And I've tried finding those cigars over and over again. I'll walk by the cigar lounge at the cigar shop downtown, and somebody will be sitting in a chair by the window and say, "Oh, what are you smoking? That smells really good." And I'll go and I'll pick one up, I'll bring it home, smoke it, and I don't get that same scent. But then I'll walk out of the room and I come back, it's like, there it is, very pleasant smelling. I don't know what the case is with this cigar yet. I'll find out a little later. I may walk out and come back in and see what the overall odor that this cigar puts out. Almost a creaminess to the smoke. It's kind of coating my mouth. Kind of reminds me of having some Cool Whip in my mouth. Not the taste, but the texture, the feel. The way it's kind of coated the inside of my mouth and my tongue, roof of my mouth, my cheeks. There's that leather again. It's a rather pleasant cigar. I'm happy with it. I don't know if I would necessarily consider this a good value at $15, but at $10 for buying 5 cigars, getting them for $10 a piece, I could see these being a good value at $10. So with that, I'll pause the video here and I'll get well into the second third, and so here we are, well into the second third. A little bit of waviness to the burn, not bad. It nowhere near as crooked of a burn as it was initially during the first third. It seems to have corrected itself and stayed corrected. So, evidently the 2 different wrapper types was not the issue. Not sure why it burned so unevenly and then did a fair job of correcting itself. But I'm not complaining. Just starting to get a little bit of a crack in the wrapper towards where the burn is. It might not even be noticeable on the camera, just the way the light's hitting it, just so. Right in there. I don't know if you can. Here it is. Probably can't even see that on the camera. Just a very, very slight crack in the wrapper. Nothing to be at all concerned about. I was actually more concerned about where I managed to tear the wrapper. But that hasn't been an issue either. So, seems to be holding up just fine. It's a well-constructed cigar. A little bit of softness to it, not bad. Discovered another slight crack. Both these cracks seem to be in the Corojo portion of the wrapper. But they haven't been an issue as far as the draw or the burn or anything. They're not peeling off, coming unraveled, that sort of thing. Just a little bit of a crack. Not a real big deal. Still some leather, a little bit of spice, some real mild white pepper, maybe a slight hint of cedar. Haven't had to ash the cigar again yet. Just that first initial ash, where I ashed off about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, and I'm currently at about 1.5 inches again. Doesn't appear to be cracking badly where it's where I fear that the ash may fall. So I'm going to let it go for a little while before I worry about ashing it. This is one of those cigars that it's more about remembering the trip you went on when you acquired the cigar. I guess mostly because this particular cigar doesn't have a whole lot of nuances to it. It's not real complex. There's not a whole lot going on with it. The blend on it, being the mild Corojo and the full-bodied Habano, is a pretty even. It's even keeled. I'm tasting and feeling the full-bodied, some of the heaviness, but at the same time the light-bodiedness, the lighter cigar, and as I'm smoking it, they're blending together nicely to form an overall medium cigar. I'm not hit with a full body and hit with a medium. I mean, with a light body. It's just a real nice blend. So they hit the mark with the dual wrapper. I've had other dual wrapper cigars before that maybe were a little more pronounced from one wrapper to the next, but this seems to be a pretty even keeled cigar, and I'm real happy with it. It's a pleasant cigar, but once again, for the money, I would have expected a bit more out of this cigar. Not that I'm disappointed at all, just I would have expected a bit more for the price, especially the initial price of $15 for this cigar. I normally wouldn't spend that much on a cigar, but I was on vacation and I wasn't worried about it. I had plenty of money to spend, and I was there for the experience. So I'm happy with my selection. It's doing a good job of reminding me of my trip. I was walking up and down Duval Street that day. This was actually my first stop. I stopped in this cigar shop, and it was interesting. It was like any other cigar shop I'd ever been in. It was quite different. It was kind of rustic, with, if I remember right, like an unfinished wood floor. Lots of wood shelving, and the displays were basically just wood construction, nothing fancy, and the cigars were in cigar boxes, not the fancy boxes, just a wooden box. And it's plenty humid in Key West, so there was really no need to have a walk-in humidor or to provide any type of humidification within the shop. Everything just sat out in the open and did just fine. The temperature was maybe a little warmer than you would normally store a cigar at, but not bad. And the humidity was probably a little more humid than it needed to be, but not so humid that it was an issue. But once again, did not need any further humidification, so keeping them in the open was just fine. It was a neat experience. It was a dimly lit shop, pretty much just the outside light through windows and that type of thing lit the shop. There may have been a few lights high up in the ceiling, but nothing real bright. It was very rustic. Not quite what I expected from a cigar shop, but it intrigued me, and I went in, and I was glad I did. I was very happy with my overall experience. Did a lot of walking that day. Actually, arriving in Key West initially was a plan, but it wasn't planned for that day. I actually started off visiting the Miami area, and on a whim he said, well, let's drive over to Key Largo and see what we can see over there. Next thing you know, we're driving all the way down the Keys, all the way to Key West, parked on Duval Street. I looked in several shops, walked up and down, talked to some of the vendors about various things. They had a raffle going on for a Shelby Cobra and a Harley Davidson. I bought a bunch of tickets for that. It was, I think it's for a good cause, and I really like the Shelby Cobra. Not to be confused with the Ford Mustang Shelby Edition Cobra, an authentic Shelby Cobra. I'm sure it's a kit, reproduction kit, but the old 1960s style race car, of the a version of the original race car that Carroll Shelby drove. Love those cars, always have. Ash still seems to be holding on fine at this point. I think it will go ahead and ash it. I've got probably close to 2 inches, 1 3/4 inches. I'll go ahead and ash it so I don't drop it. And with that, I'll go and I'll pause the tape, and I'll come back for the final third. So here we are, well into the final third. The ash is still holding on nicely. I'm once again at close to 1.5 inches, roughly 1.5 inches of ash. A slight unevenness to the burn, but it's not, you know, real wavy or anything. Just slightly uneven. Doesn't seem to be a problem. I will probably ash this in just a moment here, just based on the prior 2 ashings, where I get roughly 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches, somewhere in there, and I'm no longer comfortable with the length of the ash, fearing it will drop off. So I tend to ash it before I hit the 2-inch mark. Still a very pleasant, even smoking cigar. Once again, no real complexity, no real nuances, nothing new really coming through. Still just the basic, little bit of leather, a little bit of spice, perhaps white pepper, maybe a little bit of cedar in there. Every once in a while, I think I taste something else in there. Kind of reminds me of maybe a dish of shrimp Creole or something, just for a second, and then it goes away. You know, just for a second. Doesn't really have a real long finish on any of the flavors. They dissipate quickly, particularly just when I think I'm experiencing a new flavor, a new nuance. Before I am able to actually grasp what that is I'm tasting, it disappears on me. So in that regards, it's kind of interesting. I wish that some of these flavors that I can't quite grasp, they don't last long enough. I wish they would last longer, so I could experience and just really delve into those minor nuances. It would be real nice if they would linger a little bit longer. Maybe a long finish on the shrimp Creole would have been quite interesting. At this point, I'm going to go and ash this. It's probably approximately 1 3/4 inches, maybe not quite. I'm going to go and ash it. There doesn't seem to be any cracking to the ash, but once again, I'm comfortable with it with ash that gets too long, because I have been known to try to see how far I can go, and then the ash drops on my lap, on the chair, on the floor, whatever. And you know, I don't seem to learn from that because I'm an idiot. But so far, I've been lucky enough to ash this before it's fallen on its own. So I'm going to ash this now, and just one quick little flick, and it comes off. So it was probably a good point to ash it. I think if I try to ash it sooner, if I try to ash it at 1 inch or less, I would probably have to struggle a little bit, give it several flicks to get the ash to come off. And that would probably lead to it ashing too deep into the cigar and possibly going out. I have not had to relight or correct the cigar at all. The burn has been Other than not being a perfectly even burn, it's been a good solid burn. No issues with it at all trying to go out. I've been dealt with what I would consider to be a proper amount of smoke each and every puff. Haven't had to work at it to get it to draw. Other than initially, the tightness on the draw was a bit more than I would have liked, just initially, just on the very, well, first maybe an inch at the most, and then it opened up, started to open up, and then into the first third, it opened up nicely and had a really nice draw to it. I'm very happy with the draw on the cigar, and as I said, I'm well into the final third, approaching the nub, and I will nub this cigar. For one thing, just because of it being a little pricier than I normally would buy, so I'm going to try to get everything I can out of this cigar and see if maybe I can get that piece de resistance right at the nub. Gives you something to look forward to, gives you something to anticipate. As I said, I've smoked this particular cigar before, not in this particular shape, not the Figurado, just a general, just a basic Robusto, just a normal straight stick in a Robusto size, and that was quite pleasant all the way through. It seemed to have a little more of the nuances on the straight stick. I think as it changed size, while it did change a little bit in the flavors I was picking up, they weren't very pronounced. And I'm finding that in the slightly smaller ring gauge that I'm currently in, which is probably in the mid to upper 40 ring gauge at this time, seems to be a good size, a good ring gauge size for this cigar. As in the Robusto that I had before was offhand, I don't know what the ring gauge was on it. It was probably 50 or less. Probably like a 48 or 46 or something like that ring gauge, and I was quite satisfied with that cigar. I had smoked their all Habano wrapper cigar before as well, and that was definitely a full body cigar. I smoked that one on the beach. I was where was I? Ormond Beach, in that general vicinity. And our hotel was kind of a horseshoe shaped, right on the beach. And my room, I was on the upper floor and had a shared balcony. Everybody on the upper floor, the balcony just went around in a horseshoe shape, and they had doors that came out and big picture windows. And where I was facing directly towards the pool, and then beyond the pool was the beach and the ocean. Beautiful sunrises. You could hear the waves crashing on the beach, and it was a short walk to the beach. So just through the pool area and stairs down to the beach and to the ocean. Sit there under the stars, smoke a cigar, listen to the waves crash. Cool breeze coming off the ocean. Very pleasant. Once again, this cigar is probably more about the memory of the trip overall than it is about the cigar particularly, because as it doesn't have a whole lot of nuances. Pleasant, but as I said, not at all complex. Not a whole lot going on with the cigar, but I'm quite pleased with it. Still a little bit of the creaminess in the mouthfeel, not as much as there was earlier on. So I did my little test where I stepped out of the room for a couple minutes. I laid the cigar down in the ashtray, left the room for a couple minutes, and came back and just breathed in the various scents that this cigar puts off. It was a pleasant scent. It was not one of those cigars that just leaves the room smelling like stale, stinky smoke. Had a slight sweet smell in the room. So I'm happy with that. This would be a cigar that perhaps would not offend everyone around you because it does have a pleasant odor to it. I've had some that put off a more of a pleasant odor than this, but this was quite pleasant. Not at all offensive. So with that, as I mentioned, I will be nubbing this. I'm pretty much at the nub now. So I'm going to go ahead and nub this, and in conclusion, once again, this was a dual wrapper, Corojo Habano wrapper from Rafael Fuente of Island Cigar Factory from the Dominican Republic. The cigar was purchased in Key West from Southernmost Cigars, and the little box that I got. I put the 5 cigars that I bought. I put them in this little box. It's really neat, and I'm looking forward to going back. So, very pleasant cigar. Not worth $15 maybe, but perhaps worth the $10 that I paid for it. Overall, a very pleasant cigar.